Jason, how hard is it for independent filmmakers to get their movies on iTunes, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon?
Well, when you talk about how difficult it is to actually get on the platform, it varies depending on which platform you're approaching. So for iTunes, you have to go through, in many cases, you have to go through, well, I should say for iTunes, in all cases, you have to go through an iTunes approved aggregator or sub-aggregator that works with the aggregator. And I'm trying not to make this overly complicated. And oftentimes that aggregator, if they're not an encoding house, they work with an iTunes approved encoding house. So there's 2 points to it. There's the aggregator and then there's the encoding house. The encoding house is probably the more cumbersome in terms of time and things that have to happen. You have to get a pristine file that can be delivered to iTunes and pass the internal iTunes QC. So prior to being delivered to iTunes, the encoding house will take it through a very rigorous quality control process on the encoding house's side, hitting all of the little checklists to say, does it conform to this specification? Does it hit this, and this? And if you hit any hiccups during the encoding process, then what oftentimes happens is your movie's reviewed to see whether or not these hiccups can be repaired in-house. And if they can be repaired in-house, then it goes into a queue for repair and it gets repaired in-house. Eventually gets delivered to iTunes, and then when it's delivered to iTunes, iTunes then conducts its own QC process to make sure that it matches specifications. And if you can pass all of those crazy check marks and then your movie will go live in iTunes, right? And that can be a long process, especially for independent filmmakers where there's hiccups with their movie. Examples of that would be frame rates are out of whack, ghosting, macro blocking. And I'm just naming a few. There's a whole list of different things. So that's iTunes. Amazon's a little bit easier. To access Amazon, just go through Amazon's Create Space. Hulu requires that in addition to matching and conforming to all the QC things that I mentioned earlier, you have to make a pitch to them and they have to accept your movie. And it's the same with Netflix. I would suggest, as a general release strategy, utilize transactional platforms first. These are platforms where somebody has to pay money to actually see the movie before you go into a subscription platform or an advertised supported platform like Hulu.
Now, I've heard some people saying, well, you can circumvent some of these aggregators by building an app, and I don't know much about it. Can you tell me?
Yeah, and again, this was never a route that I took, so I very loosely know this, but you can circumvent some of the aggregators by building an app that showcases your movies. And I know there's a company out there that does that, but I think I'd be doing us all a disservice if I try to dive into that too much, because it just hasn't been, previous to my position at Chill, I worked for an aggregator, so I got to know how to actually deliver movies into the movie marketplace. I don't know much about the app marketplace.
Right. And back in the old days when Blockbuster, when it would go straight to the shelves at Blockbuster, do you remember some of the stories that you would hear from? I know that was a while back, but in terms of, has it gotten much harder or easier with the whole VOD platform versus in-store with Amazon?
Yeah, well, I think getting a movie into any stores and on a physical shelf space now, I think a lot of those relationships have deteriorated. In terms of DVD sales, you still have Redbox, and that's something that a lot of filmmakers pursue. It's never been my interest because my specialty, and I think I'm trying to ride the horse in the direction it's going, and I think everything's VOD and audience engagement online. So that's really where I spend most of my time. There still is opportunity on a degree for Redbox and to some degree Netflix for DVDs, but it's just not a focus.
Do you think eventually that filmmakers should not make DVDs as one of their Kickstarter or Indiegogo perks?
I think filmmakers should always make DVDs up until the point that DVDs are obsolete. Because there are some movies out there where, maybe it appeals to an older demographic and they still use DVDs. The way that we would recommend doing it at Chill is you still make the DVDs, but sell them as an exclusive merchandise bundle. So it's now an autographed DVD. And instead of charging $10, now you charge $40 because it's an autographed exclusive DVD and there's only 40 of them in the entire world. That does a lot of things. It helps you improve your profit margins, helps you save time going to the post office, and it helps you find out whether or not people that are into your movie are also into DVDs. And that helps you as you strategize later.